What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 783. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Las Vegas, Nevada, it's Paul Cheon. Paul, how was Christmas? Was it relaxing?
You know, it was
Exciting?
anything but. It was fine. I got to spend time with my family. But we made the very foolish decision because now that we live in Vegas, I thought, you know what? We don't want to cook. Let's go over to the Wynn Buffet. It'll be fine.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then I tried to make a reservation, totally booked. So I but we figured, you know what? We'll just show up early. We'll wait half an hour at best, at worst, rather. It'll be fine. I show up and then the lady goes, by the way, sir, it's going to be a 5-hour wait. So we had to scratch.
Isn't that just telling you to kind of go away? Like 5 hours. Yeah.
She might as well have just said, sorry, we're totally booked.
Yeah.
But I don't know why she told me literally 5 hours, but I mean, you know, the buffet would have closed by then. So anyways, we went. Yeah. So we ended up actually going to Fogo instead. That was our backup plan. And that was also just there was a line out the door.
Wow.
It took me 20 minutes to get my cheesy bread, which I love that cheesy bread. I know.
Yeah, that's the good stuff.
So now that we know, I told Lisa, I was like, hey, next time we do Christmas dinner or whatever, we'll either do it at home or just find maybe like a sit-down restaurant because the buffets, everybody just goes nuts there.
Everybody had the same idea. I can't believe she actually, you should have said, cool, sign me up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lock it in. Just text me when I'm ready.
Yeah. 10 p.m. I'll be ready to have my Christmas dinner. Yeah. I spent most of the day in the car. You know, I've got like, I don't know, 5 or 6 different places that I have to go over, from Christmas Eve and on Christmas Day, but it's good. It's one of those trade-offs, right? Where like, it would be nice just to be at like 1 or maybe 2 places and kind of just sit on the couch and not have to worry about it. But the way I do it, I do get to see a lot of people, like a lot of loved ones, a lot of different family members and stuff. And, you know, I don't get to see them that often during the year. So, you know, it's worth it, I think. But I do end up getting to a place and already I'm looking at my watch going, should I? Like, how much time do I have to actually hang out here? And then the best, though, is my aunt and cousin's place. And we do crab for our dinner. Yeah, big Dungeness. I mean, they're so good. That's
awesome.
Yeah. Everybody's cracking it. You know, it's a mess everywhere, and we've done that forever. My grandpa was he was a fisher guy. Anyway.
What does the house smell like after that, though?
It's not too bad. It's not too bad.
It's not too bad.
No, I mean this is like fresh crab, man. Like it's
sure.
It's so good. Anyway, we're gonna do the podcast today, and it is just ever so close to the end of the year, and you know what that means. It's time for the Limmies. We're going to be doing our year-end awards for 2024, and we'll have some fun with it. Before we do, I want to say thank you to everybody who supports us on Patreon. It really does mean a lot to us. You know, another year comes to a close, and once again, Patreon is kind of the lifeblood of the show. And we really, really appreciate everybody who supports us on there. It's patreon.com/limited resources. Also, thank you to Ultimate Guard for supporting the show. Ultimate Guard makes the best stuff in the business when it comes to protecting your cards. And sometimes your cards are individual cards where you need to put them in a sleeve. Sometimes it's a deck of cards that you want to put in a deck box. And sometimes it's a whole collection that you need to put in a long box or maybe even transport it in a backpack or something like that. They've got collectible deck boxes called Squaros. They have the regular deck boxes. They've got it all at ultimateguard.com. You can check out their full line of products there, and you can pick them up at your favorite local game store or your favorite online retailer. Thank you, Ultimate Guard. We do appreciate it. We've got a Patreon question of the week. One of the things that you get for being a patron of the show is you get access to the Patreon feed, which is where we put up our questions, like if we have a guest or, you know, if for our Q&A show that we do once per cycle, and also for our Patreon question of the week. This one comes from Michael, who says, "Hi guys, I have a question on how to value pick 2 in a draft. Let's say I pick a B-level white card, pack 1, pick 1. But for pick 2, I see a C-level white card and a C+ level black card. Should I pick the white card and try to solidify in white, or pick the slightly better black card and leave myself more open? Does the answer change if pack 1, pick 1 is an A-level card? Appreciate your thoughts." great question, Michael. And I think it's something that people find often when they're drafting is close calls, right? So when you approach these questions, Paul, are you of the camp of, if it's close enough, if the two picks are pretty close, I'm going to just stay in the color that I've already picked a card in? Or are you in the camp of it's early, I'm just going to pick the best card out of the pack and see where the colors fall?
Yeah, it's honestly it depends type of situation. It depends on what you first picked and how good that card was. And then also it just depends how much better the best card is than the next best card. And here we're talking about razor thin margins. The Michael here is asking about a C and a C plus level card. And that's super close, right? Because it's just you're not even entirely sure. But let's say it's a C and a B minus level card. Then for me, I would then gravitate towards the B minus level card because it's really more, obviously trying to play what you open is important, but it's more important to be able to read the signals and see what's being passed to you. And if you can find your lane, I think you're just on average, you're just going to end up with a much better deck instead of trying to fight your neighbor over something. Obviously, there are exceptions to that rule when you do open a bomb level rare or mythic that when you draw it, you have a 65% win rate or something like that. Then you're going to try your best to see that color. But otherwise, I will just try to take the best card. If I open a Dazzling Angel and then there's a bacon to a pie and a, I don't know, Healer's Hawk or something like that, I might just take the bacon to a pie there just because I feel like it's a stronger card and then just kind of play it from there. It's just not going to be too bad. On the flip side, if it is close and if it's, again, razor thin margins, let's say they're both a C plus level card, but there's a consensus. Everybody thinks one card is slightly better. I might then stay the course and pick a card that's in the same color just because you want to try to get a better sense for what actually is the open color. And you're not actually going to find that out in pick 2. Oftentimes you find out what one of the open colors are, pick 4, pick 5 of the draft, right? Let's say we're doing a foundations draft and you see a pick 6 Llanowar Elves. All right, green's probably open. Let's take the Llanowar Elves and then just try to figure out what we want to do. Or you get a 7th pick Stab. You're like, okay, well, maybe black's being a little underdrafted this time around, and then you try to figure things out. But I've had plenty of drafts in foundations and a bunch of other formats where I do it because oftentimes we do get picks like this where it's close, and I just take the card on the same color just to make sure that I don't make that second decision on what my second color should be later on.
Yeah, I like how you broke that down. I would put it into 2 like broad strokes categories. And the first one that you mentioned is one where, one card is definitely better than the other, and you're really having to decide between, do I stay in my lane color-wise or do I take the more powerful option? And in those scenarios, I will almost always take the more powerful option. As you mentioned, Paul, you don't know what's open yet. And if the card's significantly better than the other choice, then it definitely makes sense to just take the most powerful stuff, because there's this interesting dynamic that happens at the beginning of a draft where you want to be open-minded. You even want to have the mentality that if the bomb or the very, very strong card that you opened is not in colors that are open, that you're willing to let go of it and switch to the colors that are, because your deck will almost for sure be better if you're in 2 colors that are open versus if you're just scrapping it out, trying to hang on for dear life to your first pick. Those are 2 scenarios that come up pretty often. And so in that case, I'm very willing to take a very powerful or a much, a letter grade up, let's say, level card, over one that's in my color. I'm definitely not trying to just stick with it just because. But the other category that you outlined here, Paul, and it fits the first description from Michael, is more of a tiebreaker scenario, where the cards are very similar power level. If they're, half a letter grade off, I mean, I could go into any magic shop in the country and ask a couple of people, and they're going to argue that they're the same or that they're different, or, so these are rounding errors. These are things that, aren't going to be the difference between you winning the draft and losing the draft. And in those scenarios, I will try to stay in one color, because all things being equal, I would love to come out of the first pack solidified in one color with a couple of feeler picks out into a secondary color, and then let the second pack dictate where I go from there. Those are often the best decks that you get, are ones where you're in a fairly clearly open color and you've picked up a bunch of good stuff for it. And then you can kind of read the table going into pack 2. Usually you don't have that luxury. Usually, you're pretty getting settled in by pack 1 into what your 2 colors are going to be. But, there's other tiebreakers besides the color of the card, cost, like total mana cost, right? Like that matters perhaps even more, where if there's 2 cards that are similar, taking the cheaper one often, will be the one. Also, if it's a double mana colored card versus a single mana colored card, like I'll take the single if I can, because those ones are just so much easier to cast and so much easier on your mana base. So there's numerous tiebreakers that you'll face, Michael, and you've outlined one of them. I think if it is that close where the cards are effectively the same power level, then yes, I would stick in my color, but very, very willing to jump to other colors and kind of feel out the table. I view my first few picks as kind of stabs in the dark at what might be going on at the table, because I'm not going to know, as Paul said, until pick 4 or 5, kind of starting to get a feel for it. And remember, here on LR, we don't overestimate a single signal, right? One pick coming by does not mean that a color's open unless it's very late in the pack and there's really no other way that it could be. And even then, the way that I like to digest these type of things, these signals, are I take each one as its own data point. And once I start to see 2 or 3 data points that are kind of pointing in a direction, I'm starting to think, okay, this looks open, right? But one card does not necessarily do that. It's just the first data point. So keep that in mind as well. But yeah, you're talking about tiebreakers, color matters, mana cost matters, castability matters. If all else is equal there. That's a great question, Michael. Thanks for that. I know a lot of people struggle with those first early picks and trying to figure out what color you're actually going to be in. Okay, Paul, let's do the Limmies. This is our annual year-end show where we kind of recap some of the fun things, and we give away some awards, and also we use them as a way to talk about stuff that happened throughout the year. So so we'll start off with a banger, Paul. Worst grade of the year.
So there's 2. I want to, there's 2. There's one that we did together, Marshall. Mm-hmm. And then there is one that I did individually when, I did a couple of set reviews individually earlier in the year. So mm-hmm. I'll start with the more recent one because people remember this one, and it's for Foundations Draft. Yeah. And that's going to be Leyline X.
Yeah, we dropped that X, one real bad.
I think we gave it a
D. We might have given
it
an F or a D. Yeah.
I think I might have talked you up to a D, which I guess now I'm proud of.
That might be it. Yeah.
But it just turns out that the combination of Double Strike and Trample is just absolutely ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And despite there being decent removal in the set, if you just ever get to stick a creature with this, you just kind of end up winning the game. And then additionally, just the fact that when you're playing limited, because lane lines are often played in constructed 60 card decks, but when you play this in limited, you just have a really high likelihood of having this card in your opening hand, mm-hmm. right? And when you do, this is the winningest card in the entire format. So that is the thing. And I don't necessarily love that kind of design for limited play because this is not really going to see play in constructed. So I just don't understand. But it's there, and it ended up being one of the better cards in the set when we gave it a rock bottom grade.
Yeah, it's a top 15 level card. Its game in hand win rate is 61%. I mean, that's not quite like bomb tier, but it's basically there. I mean, this is one of the best cards to open. Going back to Michael's question, right? This is a colorless card that you can first pick. It goes into any deck in the format. There's no deck that doesn't want it, and it does have its downside. The if you do have to hard cast it and then equip it, the removal can get you. There's many ways to interact with creatures, but it is really astonishing that there's just like actually no creature this isn't good on. Like just a 1/1, like putting this on a rat all of a sudden makes it a real threat. And if you ever get to put it on anything with like starting power of like 3 or more, it makes that an a devastating threat that has to be dealt with and is extremely difficult to, because the truth is that Leyline Axe ends up on crappy creatures most of the time because the removal is good enough to kill all the good big flyers and, 6 drops that your opponent plays. And then this ends up on your stupid 2/2 that's left over.
Right.
And then you lose to that.
I mean, I just recently, my opponent had this in the opener, played a turn 2 Wary Thespian. My hand was great, but it was just all creatures, right? Mm-hmm. I was able to match them curve for curve, but they just went turn 3 equip, and then I just died 2 turns later.
Totally. It's a legit strategy to just equip it on something and say, if you kill it, that's fine. I'm just going to equip it next turn onto the next, junker that I have. Right. I would say also, when we did the Foundations review with Luis, it was with Luis, right? The first one, you did the rares.
I did the rares. Correct.
Yeah. Luis and I, thinking it was going to be, more towards the core set end of things, we gave cards like Shivan Dragon, the Ceratops, the 12-8 or whatever it is, Sarah Angel. We gave those higher grades than we normally would. I mean, those type of cards don't generally hold up in Modern Limited. And it turns out they don't really hold up in Foundations Limited either. I think we thought that in the world of kind of 1-for-1s and more basic gameplay, that just raw stats would carry enough to make these cards like C+, B- level cards.
Right.
And they're basically all unplayable. Sarah Angel's fine. But like if you put a Shivan Dragon in your deck, like you're doing it wrong. Like that is not where you want to be. The Ceratops too, it is not a good card. Yeah. We thought maybe they finally put enough raw stats. I mean, 8 toughness is a lot and the thing hits for 12 or whatever. I mean, it's a huge creature for 6 mana and it's like not even close. And it is interesting because it really does contrast. Like we thought that those type of things would hold up and you'd think that that would be consistent with the Leyline Axe thing too. But somehow the Leyline Axe is totally good and these creatures stink.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of creatures in this format. The best creatures in this format are actually the cheap. Either they're super cheap or they come into play and give you some kind of effect. We're talking about Big Fin Bouncer, Burglar Rat, Helpful Hunter, right? Llanowar Elves, Healer's Hawk. They're all just super cheap things that either cost 1 or 2 mana or better or both. They just give you value. And when you lose a Helpful Hunter that's been Leyline Axed, that doesn't matter. Right. You've already gotten your card back. So, yeah, that's just kind of the world we live in these days. And even trying to simple things down, make things a little simpler, didn't change that fact at all. Shivan Dragon, Grappling Kraken, just any random 6-mana monster that doesn't come into play and give you an effect is not what you want. Meanwhile, Guarded Air is actually awesome. Which is the 6-mana 1/1 that makes you 2 3/3s just because it creates 3 pieces of cardboard when you cast it.
Totally. So, yeah, that was a tough one. And what about your other? You said you had an individual.
Oh, Marshall. Oftentimes I just misread what cards do. I think that's probably it. Well, but this one so in Modern Horizons 3, Ocelot Pride. This is a cube powerhouse now too. It's one of the best 1-drops in the set. Full stop. I gave Ocelot Pride a D. Because I was thinking, look, a 1-mana 1/1 it's just like a 1-mana 1/1. How is this going to connect? It's just not going to. Yeah, you're just not going to have that much success with this card. So I'm going to give it a D. When it ended up being a top 5 rare in the entire set, maybe even top 3. Because if you play this on turn 1 on the play, and you connect, you likely just win the game. And I just didn't consider that. And I also just didn't consider the fact that there might have been other incidental ways to gain life where and getting ascended is quite easy. And then when you're ascended, you just make 2 tokens. And if you ever make 2 tokens off of your 1-mana 1/1, you probably also just win the game. So I just didn't consider all of those things. And obviously Ocelot Pride was just an A in that format.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a that's a good one. That's a good one. What about best grade of the year?
This one was kind of hard to dredge up some of the previous stuff, but obviously I did the Foundations rares with you. And so for me, I think the 2 that stand out to me are Lathril, Blade of the Elves, and Homunculus Horde, because both of these cards are cards that are taken way too highly. and they look exciting. And I think a lot of people were going to take it higher than I thought, but I gave them a bad grade. Right. I was saying Lathril is a 4-mana, 2/3 menace creature. This thing is just not going to connect very often. The tap 10 elves to deal 10 damage or whatever is just not really a thing.
Right.
So just you're paying 4 mana for a 2/3 creature with menace. You should not put this in your deck. And I think we gave it like a D or an F or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's playing out that way. It's on average being drafted at about 3.42.
Oh,
so people are third and
for
fourth
rare.
picking this card.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's got a 49% win rate.
Oh,
so it is a really, really bad card that people are taking too highly.
Wow.
And I'm sure
they're picking it that high.
Which tells me that people probably disagreed with our evaluation of this card.
Right.
And we were actually correct about how poor this card was. And same thing with the Homunculus Horde. It's a build around. There are decks where you can have success with this, but this is probably more an instance of people just playing this card with like 4 card draw spells in their deck, and it's just not good enough.
Totally.
But it's also a card that's taken around 3rd pick, and it's got a 51% win rate. So cards that you take that highly should give you a higher win rate, but it's another one of those cards where people have dreams and they are not able to convert that and turn that into reality.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, by the way, because I may or may not be one of those people. The Limmy for Hungriest Co-Host, it goes to Luis. He wins again. His unbroken streak. But I did get the honorable mention. And Paul, there's really good news. You also got honorable mention for Hungriest Co-Host. Wow. This is a real honor for both of us. And we'll have to accept the award on Luis's behalf this time.
Yeah, I feel like if the three of us, instead of team drafting, which, I think we would make for a pretty formidable team draft squad, but I feel like our trio would also be really formidable in just an eat-off against another random three people, right?
Oh, I would put us, I mean, we've been to restaurants before numerous times, us three, and it is painful for the rest. We even went to a couple all-you-can-eat places before. Like, what was that, sushi or something we had somewhere? And it's like, oh, man, we put a dent in that place.
Oh, with I remember that place.
I think Monty came with us,
Right, yeah. I've had instances where the waiters or the waiters or waitresses will go, "Are you sure?"
Right. Like, are you like, I'm looking at the list of stuff that we've brought over here. Yeah. We had that good KBBQ place in Vegas, right?
Right. Yeah. At 888.
But we kept it. We didn't go
reasonable.
Crazy. That was us being reasonable. They didn't know that. They probably thought we were so crazy. Okay, most embarrassing draft pick. What's your most embarrassing draft pick, Paul?
Yeah, I had to turn back the clock because I think the best way to do so is to look at your first couple of drafts in any format, right? Because that's when it's going to be most embarrassing because you just don't know what the cards do.
Totally.
And for me, that was one of my first drafts. It was at Murders at Karlov Manor.
Okay.
And it was my very first draft. And I was drafting, some blue cards or whatever. And I took an Eliminate the Impossible, 4th pick.
What was that card?
Which is it's not a bad card. It's 1 in a blue instant. All creatures your opponents control get -2/-0 until end of turn, and you investigate. So it's a fine trick, right? And, there's some blowout potential there. And I was kind of doing the investigate thing already. But I passed a doppelganger.
Oh, no.
And that is a card. Basically, once I got it cast against me, I basically never passed that card again.
Seriously.
Because Doppelgang is my favorite card for the year. It's just, the card is absolutely ridiculous.
Totally.
You basically take it and draft a deck that can survive until turn 8, and then you usually win the game with that card.
Totally.
And so I look back and I was like, I cannot believe somebody passed me Doppelgang 4th pick, because it's one of the best rares actually in the set. Among top players, this was a top 3 rare in the entire set. So the good players know kind of how to draft around this card. And I just took a kind of mediocre combat trick over one of the best rares in the set. So that was my most embarrassing pick.
But come on. I mean, Doppelgang is blue, green, XXX. Like, this does not look like a good card when you see it. I don't blame you.
Right?
Like, I would be like, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think it was Doppelgang was probably one of the cards. I mean, I bet you this would be on our list. I don't remember what grade we gave it, but I bet you we did not give it a very good grade, especially relative to how good it actually played. This is one of those cards that until you either cast it or have it cast against you, it doesn't quite click on what it does. You know, you're like, oh, right. I'm going to completely get all these triggers. Like, you know, it looked like Arena exploded every time you cast a Doppelgang for 8.
Yeah, so that's the thing. When I first read this card, I thought it was every time you pay X, you get an extra copy of something. So I thought when you pay 5 mana, you get to copy one thing. And then when you pay 8 mana, you get to get 2 things. It turns out when you pay 8 mana, you get 4 things.
Right.
Because you get 2 copies of 2 things. I did not read that properly.
It's
and I was
hard
like,
to figure out. 4
permanents for 8 mana? Yeah, okay. Sign me up.
Yeah. I bet you anything we gave it a low grade. You know, it's funny because I don't know if I gave it this, but this is the type of card that would fall into that category for me, which is I have a certain grade add-on, you know, during the set reviews where you have to, you know, it's the prove it. Right? Isn't that what you called it,
right.
Paul? The prove it card, right?
Yeah,
it's
show
like,
me. Yeah.
It's like, you know, there's some potential here, but I'm not really buying it. Right. And until somebody casts this thing and I go, oh, okay. Yeah. No, that's really good. Or maybe it just happens to be fully supported in a format, or maybe the speed of the format allows for it to be really good. But I'm, you know, a lot of times I'm like, I'm not buying it until that starts happening. And Doppelgang is the type of card that I think I would put in that category for 2 reasons. One, it has such an intimidating mana cost, right? Like you really do kind of focus in on it's going to be 8, right? Like that's a lot of mana. And then the other thing is it's a confusing card. Like it really is. Like even when you read it a little more slowly, where you're like, okay, what does this do? Right? How many things do I get? How does this work? Right? Like
exactly.
You know, you need these targets and whatever. But yeah, that's a good one. My embarrassing draft picks are more recent. And I have a problem, Paul. It's gotten really bad. So I did Pioneer Masters. You know, we did our set primer. I drafted it for, I put a good 25 drafts in on Pioneer Masters. Okay. And then I was like, this isn't working for me. It does not click as a format. I didn't find it very compelling. And I had really come around on Foundations. You know, like I was worried about it at first. I mentioned it in our first couple episodes that I was like, is this too basic? Like we're coming off of a really great draft format here. And I'm just a little worried that Foundations, maybe it hits the mark, but it just, there isn't quite enough meat on that bone. That has not been the case. I went back to Foundations and I have been drafting it nonstop since. I really, really like Foundations. It's interesting because when we first talked about it, I was saying that I hoped that it would fill that role that Corsets used to, which is that it felt like a bit of a palate cleanser, right? Where it was like a little simpler, a little more basic, but also that it sort of reinvigorates that love for just drafting, right? Just like it doesn't have to be 75 words on every card and everything flips over and turns. You know, it can just be good, solid design Magic draft, which is in and of itself just such a beautiful and fun experience that it doesn't have to be crazy. Look, I'll always, prefer Vintage Cube or some master set or some crazy thing, that's done well to something like Foundations. But dude, it checks the box for me. The problem I have is, and this is where the embarrassing draft picks come in, that I just can't control myself. They put cards like Extravagant Replication, Rise of the Dark Realms, freaking 9 mana, Rite of the Dragon Caller, the 6 mana red one. And yes, Homunculus Horde is definitely on that list. The Aberration or whatever it's called, Abhorrent Aberration.
Which one?
The blue-black 5-drop that mills them. Consuming Aberration. Like these type of cards, I cannot say no. Like I'm like, there's like some really good, really necessary card for the deck. Like, hey, look, it's bacon to a pie. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's a Homunculus Horde and I already have a Think Twice.
Well, if you take cards like that, I will say you're probably not going for rank 1. And you're going for rank fun.
No, I'm going for, like I'm at Mythic, but I'm like at 99% or whatever and like not really trending in the right direction.
Yeah.
But dude, it's so fun to build around these things. And they're right. They really did find that line because these are real cards. Like I have won many, many games with Homunculus Horde, like by being patient with it. And it is a real Magic card, but it is just worse than like the more basic things that you can do at that mana cost. They're like common or whatever. But I don't care. Like I'm going for it and I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it. But it is embarrassing the level to which I will throw away, actual win percentage to take one of these cards and try to build around them.
But I think it's a really great thing for them to create cards like this for the limited environment, right? It just makes it important. So much more replayable. Right, you're like, all right, I've already done Dimir control, but have I done it with double Homunculus Horde with 5 fleeting distractions, right?
Right.
Like, or the blue-red spells deck with Rite of the Dragon Caller. Just having these cards exist, even though you're only going to get there maybe a quarter of the time when you draft these cards, but when you do, it feels so great. And sure, you're going to lose a bunch of games because you don't draw any spells or you've cast all your spells before you cast your thing. But being able to pull it off once is just. It makes up for the loss where you've been holding it in your hand. So, that's the thing. Like we're playing a game here. It's all about having fun and having access to cards like this and being able to pull it off. Like I've lost to Extravagant Replication 3, 4, 5 times already. Because the thing is, if you survive, the turn you lose. You lose. Right? Yeah. They're just going to get a permanent every single turn. So yeah, I think having those cards are awesome. The only thing I've actually been able to pull off on that list that you mentioned is the Homunculus Horde, probably because it costs 4 mana.
Yeah, because it's a little easier. The other things. Yeah, I think I will say that these cards do hit a nice sweet spot for me too, because I do actually, it's funny, I feel like I'm irresponsible during the draft because I can't say no to these cards, but during the game, I am irresponsible. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of looting, particularly in blue, right? Many cards will allow you to discard cards. And I found that these cards are very good. And I mean it, actually good in some matchups, right? If your opponent's not putting much pressure on you, cards like Extravagant Replication, Rite of the Dragon Caller, they are dominating late game cards. But it's when your opponent goes 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop that these are horrendous cards, like unplayably bad. And so I am very willing to loot these away if my opponent has, a plains and a mountain on the other side. But if they're blue-green or if they're another blue-black deck or whatever, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get you. I'm hanging on to this thing and we're going for a ride. So I feel some amount of shame because I just can't say no to them. That's why they're under most embarrassing draft pick. But I'm also not changing. I'm not changing. Yeah, I'm sticking with it. This is a really interesting one this year. Most improved format. What did you have for most improved format, Paul?
So what I had for most improved format is Murders at Karlov Manor. Mm-hmm. And the reason is, you got to hear me out on this, because Murders at Karlov Manor is certainly not my favorite set for the year. Not even close. But I will say when I first made this shift in my content from cube drafts to normal arena drafts, I started with Murders at Karlov Manor. And week 1 of the format for Mythic drafters, Boros was by far the best thing you could be doing.
Not and even close.
Every single high Mythic opponent that I played against would go Novice Inspector turn 1, 2-drop, Inside Source into some kind of go wide pump spell, and you would just lose the game. And it happened over and over and over again, to the point where I actually hated the format. I actually considered just quitting Murders at Karlov Manor full stop and going back to cube drafts because I disliked that play pattern so often. I'm like, this is stupid. The best drop in the format is a 1-drop. Everybody's curving out. Whoever goes first just wins. And I just absolutely hated that. But the great thing about Draft Marshall is that it is self-correcting. And too many people started drafting Boros because they all saw that how good it was. And then Simic actually ended up being one of the stronger archetypes and was actually a good enough defensive deck to be able to keep up with the Boros decks. And the format actually slowed down a little bit over time because of how the Boros players were cannibalizing on each other. And then the format actually improved, and I didn't mind it so much towards the middle and the end of the format. But at the beginning, I hated it. I went from this is the worst format ever, 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, to 6 out of 10, right? So for me, that was a massive improvement.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember. So it's interesting. I just looked up right now the format speed. And, the thing that I really look at, the speed, of course, is a thing, but I really look at game win rate on the play, right? That's the thing that I believe gives you that feeling that you described where it's like, I won the die roll. I have a huge advantage here. And it's really interesting because it is still a huge advantage on there. In fact, there's only one set that has a bigger advantage that's not like a chaos draft or a cube draft or whatever. And actually, I should just say it this way. There are no normal sets, regular baseline sets that have a bigger game win rate on the play advantage than MKM today. Yep. So that's after the correction. And I guarantee if I went there, during the time frame that you're looking at, it was even worse. So that was a huge improvement. I did not think that format was going to come around. I thought, well, here we go again. And remember, this is coming off of like literally the last 4 sets were the 4 fastest sets in the history, the 4 fastest and most game winner on the play advantaged sets in the history of Arena. And then we had that one and I thought, oh my God. And it did end up being fast and it didn't completely fix, but it was a format that I played all the way through versus one that I felt similar to you where I'm like, man, I got to do this again. Cause I actually don't mind those formats, but not when it's every single set. It's like, come on, dude. Like these 1-drops were getting out of hand. That was when I really started to get worried that this might just be the way it is now. That did not end up being the case, though. Numerous sets this year gave us different looks, different paces. And the one that I would say for most improved format, which I just touched on, is Foundations. It really did feel too simple at first, and it really felt like, to me, like one of those formats that we would draft for 10 or 15 drafts and kind of go, yeah, I did all the things, there's not much here. And that hasn't been the case. It really matured well. And I'm going to give it a very good grade, I think, in our Sunset show for it, because, this one had a very, they always talk about it like comedians, right? Where they have to like go on stage after a different comedian just went. And it's like when that first comedian goes out and just kills it and everybody's laughing, and now you have to go out there and somehow carry that energy over or meet that level or even exceed it. And those comedians are like, dang, they always want to put up crappy ones ahead of them so that they look good. And it's like Foundations had a very, very big shoes to fill. And look, it hasn't. I mean, it's not on that level, but dang, I'm still drafting it and still enjoying it. And that's a pretty big improvement as well. This is a good one. Most valuable contributor guests on the show. And we've actually got a new winner this year. Luis Scott-Vargas. Congrats. He had those great insights on Foundations Limited when he was a guest on our show, Paul. Yeah. And I don't know. I thought he really did a good job of contributing given how rusty he was at podcasting.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible that he was able to just kind of get on there at the last second and really just prove that he still got it, I guess.
Daddy still
gave us some great insights.
Yeah, so we can put another trophy on his trophy wall. No, of course, Paul, you're going to win the most valuable contributor guest this year for jumping in for Luis. I mean, come on, you're GOAT tier now. You're at co-host status. I mean, you're gonna, like, next year you won't even be eligible because you won't be considered a guest anymore. Like you
not
just,
a rookie, not a guest.
You had such a run. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, so congratulations, Paul, for winning.
Thank you.
And thank you, by the way, for coming on and doing such a great job and filling in for Luis. I know he appreciates it too. This one's a little tough. Most valuable contributor sign-offs. Gonna have to give it to Luis, right?
Oh yeah, he's always
me and you suck at sign-offs. His are so much better. He's got recipes, life advice, stories. Like, he'll talk about old days on the PT, cheaters, stuff like that. And you and I just kind of go, so what did happened? You eat? What'd you have last week? Yeah. And by the way, that's a good one for today, right? Because I kind of want to know how you had approached the Fogo on Christmas. I may hit you up for that one in a little bit. Most valuable episode. I'm going to go with one from earlier in the year, which is when we had you come on, Paul, and we talked about that. It was episode 733, working at WotC, YouTuber Life, Vintage Cube. with Paul Cheon. And this is where we really got to kind of go deep on where you were at. You know, the dust had kind of settled on you not being at Wizards anymore and having that stretch of time where you couldn't do coverage, and then switching over to becoming a full-time YouTuber. And then we also got to pick your brain about where you're at with the Vintage Cube. But I thought that was a really, you know, we do our set reviews and we do that stuff. And, you know, that's like what the show's about. Like that's the core of it. But these type of more personal shows are the ones that tend to stand out to me now, you know, when I look back at the year.
Yeah, no, it was great to be on the show without having necessarily to worry about any filters anymore as well.
Yeah.
That's kind of one thing when I was working at Wizards, I just try to keep a low profile. You just don't want to get in trouble for the most part.
I think people don't understand that so much. They just think that people just get really busy or whatever. But like, you know, Wizards is very like, they play it extraordinarily safe when it comes to stuff like that. To the extent that they, you know, you can tweet and stuff if you work at Wizards, but like you can't do your own content. Like they're just like, nah, it's just, you know, conflict of interest. And I get it. You know, it's a corporation. They're publicly owned. Their hands are kind of tied with it. But you really do see it, you know, when people go to work there, that it's like they kind of disappear, you know, because you're like, well, I could tweet this, but what if it comes off wrong and I end up in my, you know, getting talked to about it, like, or it's an interesting tweet. Like the upside just doesn't, you know, isn't there for the downside. Some of these people kind of make an executive decision there, but you were unleashed when we got you back on the show. Yeah. And that's a good time actually, Paul. How are things going with everything? I mean, when we did that show, you were just at the beginning, you know, of kind of figuring out what the roadmap would look like for you, you know, like how coverage would fit in, and then, you know, how YouTube would go and all that stuff. How is it going?
You know, it's been going far better than I would have hoped, or it's been awesome. It really has been. You know, you and Luis and Gabby right at the beginning, you know, at the beginning of the year, I just didn't really know what I was going to do. I had some options, but of course it's still kind of that news is still a bit of a shock where you're just like, oh, I don't have a job anymore. What do I do? Right. I could go back to what I did before, but that was 7 or 8 years ago. A lot has changed since then. I still had the same old webcam. I didn't have any new equipment. My sound was horrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do any of these things. But, you know, you guys all really helped me out, which I really, really do appreciate. And now, you know, we talked about some goals, kind of, hey, what are you going to need to see if you can continue doing this? And, you know, I set some personal goals for myself. And for this year, I really, you know, I hit those goals and exceeded those goals. And I'm really happy with that. And I think 2025 can potentially grow into even more things, just because now I know for sure that I'm going to be doing the coverage stuff, which is obviously very good on top of that. And then I have also been given the opportunity to do the Arena Championship events. And you know how it is, the life of a content creator. You're grinding, you're finding income sources from all kinds of different channels. So at the beginning you have nothing. And then you're starting to figure out what you're going to do with the sponsorships or the Patreon or all that stuff. But now I finally figured out kind of where all those income sources are coming from. So at least for the time being, things are looking really, really good for me. And just really, really happy with the fact that I'm able to still provide for my family while just playing Magic.
Yeah,
for
the dream.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It is kind of the dream. It's great.
No, I'm super happy for you, man. I have to say, you know, Paul's a really great example of how to do it. You know, he asked Luis and I and Gabby and stuff, people who have done this before, to, you know, what would you do kind of thing. And so we all talked about it, and, you know, we had a bunch of stuff. But the two things that really stood out to me, Paul, about your approach that I was really impressed by were, one, your work ethic. You know, once we got you, pointed in a direction, you were off to the races. And, you know, a good example was what you mentioned, video editing. And Paul didn't know how to, sorry. I need to take a drink. Paul didn't know how to edit videos at all. And so I did kind of a crash course with him. And, you know, and he committed to that, to figuring it. Cause I told him, you know, you can hire somebody to do this later, but it's going to hit your bottom line. Like, it's going to cost you money to do it. And you have time right now, right? Like the having time in the day wasn't the limiting factor for him. And, I just personally think it's really good to learn a new skill that you might be able to use for something else. And then also that you know exactly what you're putting out into the world when you edit your own stuff, right? It's like, it's on you and you feel that responsibility. And yes, at some point, especially for relatively straightforward videos like draft videos, you can offload that to somebody else and maybe use that time to do something more productive. But, getting your hands dirty at the beginning, I think is really important. And Paul dove in and he learned how to do video editing, which I was really impressed by. And the other one was your patience. One of the things that I was trying to, get into you real early, in the year when you were gearing up to start and to launch was two things, which is one, make sure everything's ready when you launch. Don't launch halfway and then start putting things into place after. Like, get it all ready and then say all at once, I'm doing this and it's ready and videos go up tomorrow, right? Or today, or go check this out now. And Paul did all of those things. And that takes a lot of patience because you get excited. You have a few videos. Why don't I just put one out? Let's just get this going. But it hits so much better when people know what you're doing, when you're doing it, and what to expect from it. And you can't really give them that until you've actually developed all of the things behind the scenes to make that happen. So you did that. And then the other one is the longer term patience thing, because any given month can be very up and down in content creator world and on YouTube and monetarily and all that stuff. And so I remember telling Paul, I said, bare minimum 3 months, but I would commit to just do this every day for 6 months and just put your head down and then wake up then and see where you're at. And, it's kind of like if you're trying to lose weight, like, yes, you can weigh yourself every day, but like your weight's going to go up and down and you're going to get discouraged or get emotional about it. It's like, stick to your plan for 6 months and then weigh yourself. Right. And right. And I guarantee if you've stuck to that plan, you're going to see good progress and you're going to be happy with the way things are going. But that patience is really hard. We're human beings. We want this stuff now. And Paul, you did a really good job with that too. I only had to talk you off the ledge like twice, to
what's going on, Marshall? Nobody's watching my
Nobody watched my video. Yeah. But you had a lot of stuff to figure out too, I did. What were your videos going to be, because like Luis has the cube market cornered. I mean, that guy's just like
he's got it monster. Locked in. I tried making some cube videos the other day, Marshall. People were not having it.
They're just commenting like, this isn't Luis. What's going on here? They're just like,
yeah, just like, who? This is not Luis. Why would I watch this guy? No, but the thing is, it's just obviously Luis has had a lot of success with that avenue, so he's going to recommend that because that's what he knows. Mm-hmm. So, but for me, I was doing that for a little bit, but I was thinking, well, maybe there's upside to do some other things. So I have done a lot of experimentation, just trying different formats, reviewing my old videos, doing set reviews, playing standard, playing. I've just tried everything because you have to, right? You need to. And if it doesn't work, you go back to the drawing board. It's like, now I know what the meat and potatoes of my content's going to be, which is going to be the everyday draft stuff. But every now and then try something else, and maybe that'll lead to something else, because that's how a lot of people have had success, right? If I kept doing the cube thing, it might not have been nearly as good as me making the decision to shift to arena draft videos, because the viewership has basically tripled since then.
Totally.
Right? It's been such a big thing. And I mean, this just applies to a lot of other things. We have a good friend, Ailey, right? Who was making just regular limited or just regular arena content, and then shifted over to commander content, and her channel is absolutely blown up.
Yep.
Right. And so it's just, you try things to see if it works, and then if people start taking some nibbles at it and there's something there, then you push hard and see what you can get out of it. It's the same thing with your watch channel, right? It was something that you did as a complete hobby.
Yeah.
And you just kind of put yourself out there, and now it's been doing incredibly well. So it's just, I am going to continue to experiment, but I will say I might be done with the cube experiment for now. It's just, Luis just has all of it.
He does. He's on the Cube Island and there's nobody invited right now. Yeah. And then, I think you really hit your stride, when you started making the runs for rank number 1 and you started actually hitting that goal. Like, that's really exciting. And your Arena Open videos, like the ones where there's stakes, are the ones that are like really fun to watch because, as much as we've had coverage and streamers and all that stuff for a number of years, the confluence of something that actually matters, like when you're playing for $2,000 or you're trying to get on the arena championship or whatever, with somebody who takes it seriously and actually is trying really hard and is good at, you show your emotions and you show your intensity, during those moments, there isn't that much of that stuff around. And I think that that's really your sweet spot, competitive goal-based stuff, is there. And I think that that's where you really shine. I mean, that's where your videos are like, dang, he's killing these. And by the way, it shows in the viewership too. And by the way, if you want to check out Paul's channel, there's a link in the description below. Best card name Limmy of the year. What you filled this out, Paul, and I'm like, the first one you put on there, I'm like, that has to be it, right?
It's for me. This is the thing is, I even just use this term all the time. Anyways, It's holy cow.
Holy cow.
Holy cow is the best. It's a freaking flying ox. It's a holy cow. Is it an angel? I don't know if it's an angel ox.
I think it is. It actually has wings.
It does.
Yeah, let's look. Holy cow. Ox angel.
Ox angel. Yeah, I mean it's my best name. I mean, there's a ton of great stuff. There's a lot of puns, especially in Bloomborough. There's a ton of fun ones.
Did you like those? I maybe I just am old now or something, and I was like, like the
I bet Luis liked them.
Yeah, well, like the really clever ones hit, but a lot of them are kind of like a little bit of an eye roll, crumb and get it. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
There was a really bad one. Like there was one that was like offensively bad. I don't remember what it was though. And I think it was in Bloomborough. Sugarcoat's kind of funny.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of fun with this. They have a lot of talented writers, and they can, if they want to make some funny card names, they can. But for me, it's still just holy cow. It's pretty simple. Yeah. It's just a funny thing to say, and the card was actually good too. So.
What about Take Out the Trash? Do you like that one?
Yeah, that one's decent. Take Out the Trash. Is that the 3 damage spell?
Yeah, it's the red does 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker one.
Yeah. I just like I like the cards when it also hits with the flavor as well, and I guess that's an okay thing with the removal. But yeah, Take Out the Trash is not bad because it does seem appropriate for a removal spell, right?
Yeah,
and then you have just the classic. It's very clean, which is just murder, right? But that's been around forever.
Murder's
but you just know what that card is.
Yeah,
it's just a kill spell. Something's gonna die, right?
Holy cow, though! Like that's a nice one. What was the sweetest build around Limmy winner?
So I had two. Number one, it's not. You're going to have to turn the clock back, but this was an OTJ, actually. Outlaws of Thunder Junction. That was Intimidation Campaign.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the card.
Yeah.
What the funny part is? That card wasn't even that good relative to... Like the win rate was just like 56% or something.
Totally.
But you just always took it if you were Blue-Black Crimes and you were just like, I don't care. This card's going to be awesome and it's going to get me a ton of value. And I'm going to draft Raven of Fell Omens and find all the deserts and try to do everything I can to commit as much crime as possible. And this was the card that you take this and you go, okay, I'm Blue-Black. I'm going to commit crimes and get value.
Yeah, that was it was interesting because it was good enough. But, it reminded you of, what was it called? The other campaign? Whatever.
Oh, Disinformation campaign. And that card was way better.
Busted. Yeah, that card was...
That was a 2-for-1 every time you cast it or whatever, right?
I was always trying to relive the glory days, with that one. And unfortunately, even with a similar name and casting cost, it was definitely not that. Yeah, that was definitely one of them. Builder's Talent.
To me, that's the number one.
It's probably the best one, but is it the sweetest one?
Well, see. Oh, do you have another one?
Well, I don't know. I mean, there was a lot in Foundations that I just mentioned that I really like. I feel like that's the set that really nailed it the most with those, especially if you're talking about something being sweet, right? Like trying to do something really cool. I'd probably give it to one of those, like Homunculus Horde or something like.
I see.
I'm kind of basic when it comes to that, but yeah.
Yeah, but don't you want to go Builder's Talent into Bumbleflower Sharepot? Like that was just such a sweet thing you can do.
I don't remember what that is, but I probably would.
It was an artifact that made a food, so you get 2+1/+1 counters, and then you can sack it 5 mana, I believe. You can sack it to kill something, and then you level up your Builder's Talent, and then you get it back, and then it's just a lot of value. That
is pretty good.
And the cool thing about the talent in general was just since it's an uncommon, there are times where you could get multiple copies of this and really pop off, right? You can have the multiple, and it just made you draft a totally different deck. Instead of just your green-white rabbit deck or what have you, you just draft this Builder's Talent deck that's utilizing food and all these other ways to generate +1/+1 counters and just attack the game at a different axis, which I liked because outside of that, Bloomburrow was pretty straightforward, right? Black, white, life gain, green, white, rabbits, green, black, squirrels. I insert creature type with the color combination. Whereas with Builder's Talent, you got to do something a little bit different. And I feel like the reason why I like uncommons is you get to actually look forward to being able to do that thing. And it's not that rare, right? I'm going to turn the clock back, and 90% of the viewers probably won't know, but back when I used to draft Champions of Kamigawa, I loved drafting the Dampened Thought deck, which is basically just this 1 blue uncommon. You cast it and you mill your opponent for 4 cards, but you can splice it onto these spells that were arcane spells. And basically you draft a bunch of arcane spells and then you just take Dampened Thought and you just mill people out. That was a legitimate way to win the game. So just stuff like that. And oftentimes they're uncommons because you can be like, I'm going to try to draft a Dampened Thought deck. I don't have one yet. But man, if I get one, it's going to be great.
But hold on.
Just wait. We got one more pack to go. I mean, you've seen Luis draft those vintage cube decks. He's just like, okay, I just need the Thassa's Oracle. I just need the Thassa's Oracle, and I'm going to pop off here. And then he doesn't get it, and it's
and then
not
he finds some other way to win. Yeah.
But he does find some other way. Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite build arounds was Threats Around Every Corner.
Oh yeah.
The 3 and a green enchantment from Duskmourn, and that one, I felt like that one was one that kind of gave you free reign to splash and like kind of go big, expensive, and it paid for itself right away mostly, and you didn't need to do too much more to make it work. So that would definitely be on my short list as well. And then also, I would give honorable mention. I don't think any of these would count as like the sweetest build around, but remember the case of the blankety blank, those were pretty good. Like those played out pretty well as like sort of in between like a full build around, but it wasn't like you didn't need to like change your deck usually to make those work. But at the same time, they weren't just good on their own, most of them. So like you did need to consider them, on if they're going to fit into your build or what you were trying to do. And that's a very difficult fine line to walk. And those actually did a pretty good job of that too.
Yeah. Case of the Filched Falcon. If you have a blue-red artifact deck, it's 1 mana investigate, and then you get a 4/4 out of the deal, which is great. Case of the Gateway Express was just too good. That was just a removal spell, so that just goes in any deck. But then there's also
made a little simple,
the detective case and some other stuff to get you there. So.
Yeah, so I thought they did a good job with those too. Yeah. What about our most disappointing build around?
There's a lot.
Yes.
Number one, and this is not a huge disappointment, but it's just, Smoky Lounge, Misty Salon. That card is actually very powerful. Mm-hmm. But the problem is the Rooms deck just didn't quite get there.
Yeah.
And it's a deck that you can draft, but it just didn't quite get there and didn't hold up power level wise to a lot of the other things you could be doing in Duskmourn. And so for that reason, I think that was somewhat disappointing. But then there's some actually really disappointing ones because that still had a decent win rate. Mm-hmm. But that's one for me where I was just like, oh, the Rooms deck just didn't quite get there. The other one was Monstrous Vortex in Modern Horizons 3, which is 3 and a green. I believe when you cast a creature with power 5 or greater, you get to basically discover some number. And it gives you a dream, right? It's an uncommon, it's 4 mana. You're like, all right, well, I guess I'm just supposed to play a bunch of big Eldrazi after this, and it's going to be great for me. And it just didn't work. It actually had a 46% games in hand win rate.
Oh, wow.
Where you look at that really card and you're like, oh, it could be promising. But it just didn't quite get there. The actual signpost uncommon you wanted to take was, Path of Annihilation, which ended up being one of the best uncommons in the entire set. But Monstrous Vortex not being there. Another one that I thought was going to be excellent, and I actually thought it was good at the beginning of the set and ended up actually playing out pretty poorly, is Case of the Pilfered Proof, which is white detective case where you play it on turn 2, and then anytime you play a detective, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. The biggest problem with this card is it is a complete blank when you draw it in the late game. Yes. When you play it turn 2, it's fine. Often, if you can play this turn 2 and play an Inside Source on turn 3, you get a 2/2 and a 3/3, then you get to really go off that way. But there were just too many instances where this doesn't give you enough value, and it ended up with about a 48% win rate. Oof. So that is also kind of a disappointing showing, given how powerful the card actually looks.
Yeah, that's a tough one. This Smoky Lounge, as you said, pretty decent card, but
yeah.
What about the sweetest archetype from the whole year?
There's so many, Marshall.
I know the one that comes to mind for me. What did you have?
Okay, well, I'll tell you right now, there's no Boros decks in sight because they all just do the same thing.
They're all boring.
There's a few. Okay, so let's see. My favorite probably is just Temur Delirium from Duskmourn. And basically the way that it goes is it's just Spineseeker Centipede control. That's all it is. It just revolves around that card. Yep. If you're lucky, threats around every corner. But just the Temur colors worked really well together. The Gruul's trying to do the Delirium thing, but Blue-Green's doing the Manifest thing. And Manifest Dread plus Delirium just worked so well together, right? Just because you're filling up your graveyard, and then you just get Delirium easily, and then you splash for some great cards. So I really, really liked kind of Temur Delirium in general. So any combination, green, red, splash, blue, blue, green, splash, red. Your base green, and then you're playing blue or red. Maybe sometimes you'll splash black for Swarmweaver if you get something like that. And then another one was just the various Simic decks. I'll go with the Simic Collect Evidence ramp deck in MKM.
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the decent ways to actually fight the Boros decks, the V2 Ghazi Inspector, which is the 1 in a green for a 1/3 reach creature with Collect Evidence 6. And when you do, you put a +1/+1 counter and gain 2 life. That card was pretty important, right? You land cycle with a Topiary Panther, you put a 6-drop in your graveyard, then you play this card and you have a 2/4 reach creature that gained you 2 life. That goes a really, really long way to help stabilize against the Boros decks. And then you just do all the sweet things that blue-green decks tend to do, which is spin your wheels and draw a bunch of cards, which are things I love doing.
Yeah, I think my sweetest archetype was the Simic Frogs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the frog deck.
Yeah, because I think they kind of they accomplished 2 things at once, and both of them are quite difficult, which is making green-blue good. That has been hard for them. Most of the time, that archetype has fallen short and is too slow. It doesn't have enough interaction. And even if it's a cool and even potentially powerful archetype, it just isn't able to keep up with some of the faster decks that they had been making. So that part was cool. Also, it was an outlier in BLB because it was, pretty fast format. And this Simic Frogs deck was the only deck of that type that actually could keep up. But then also they tried something new ish, right? Like caring about returning cards to your hand is something that they haven't really leaned into too hard, and they, at least put their foot in that pool there, and it worked. They had to push it, but this looks to me like one of those ones where, like Pawn Prophet, when we first saw it, it was like, whoa, that looks really good, and then it was even better because it just worked with everything that deck was trying to do, and it had such an easy mana cost for that deck, and nobody else really wanted it. So that was, the type of card that you could tell that they put extra effort into that to make sure that it was right, that it was cheap enough, but that the cost was correct, and that it actually worked. And on top of it, it was fun to play. Like That is hard. Like it's a color pair that doesn't get a lot of love. It was able to keep up with the format. It was interesting because they did something different with it, and it was fun but powerful enough that you didn't feel like, you were throwing away equity by drafting it. And that's a lot,
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of the power in this deck just came from the commons. Right? There are 3 commons in particular. You have Sunshower Druid, Pawn Prophet, and the Sticky Tongue Sentinel, and they're all just common, right? And I mean, namely, the Sunshower Druid was played such a huge part in the success of this deck because that's the creature that most other decks don't want.
Yes.
And you play it in your Frog Deck and it's a 1-drop, it gains you life. That was an aggressive format, right? The green-white aggro Rabbits was one of the best archetypes in the entire format, but you were able to just keep up because you have so many good, cheap things to keep up with what your opponents are doing. You have Sunshower Druid, Baker's Bane Duo as a way to gain some life, and then you have the Sticky Tongue Sentinel, which is a great blocker as well on top of all of that. So they really, whoever was in charge of pushing blue-green, this is kind of how you need to do it, because otherwise, if you think you did good enough, you're probably not pushing hard enough, because oftentimes in that instance, blue-green ends up underperforming,
right? Because
you just don't have, your interaction is not as good enough. So the only way to keep up is by making creatures in that archetype be able to keep pace with what a lot of the other things are trying to do. So I think this is kind of the approach you need to take to make Simic successful. Good, efficient, cheap creatures to keep up. Defensive, sure, to keep up with what your opponents are trying to do. And because they figured out the formula with Boros, yeah, good, cheap, efficient creatures are always good. And so you're always going to have a high win rate if you can just curve out. Why don't you give the other colors good defensive tools that can match what some of the aggressive decks are doing, right?
Right.
When Novice Inspector is the best 1-mana creature in the format, why don't you make Sunshower Druid one of the best 1-mana creatures in the format to keep up with those decks? They need to do something about a different archetype, which has been a big problem, but we'll get to that later. But I think they did a really good job with blue-green.
Yeah, they really did, and it ended up, kind of all coming together in that one format. And then you had a shout out here for Dimir Crimes, which I have to put on the list because, of course, that to me was one of the most fun controlling style decks to play. And committing crimes, that was a pretty dang good mechanic. It fit seamlessly because it was what you want to do anyway. It's not like you're like, wait a minute, I have to kill my opponent's creatures. You're like, well, you're doing that anyway, right? But they could just put some nice little bonuses around it and sort of flag it as a thing where it normally isn't. And it was really seamless. It in fact, in that color pair, it was almost trivial. And, you could actually argue that it was too easy to commit crimes in that particular color pair. But even then, they didn't make payoffs for crime committing so good that it was just like, this is stupid. They really did fit it in. You felt like you were doing stuff. It was worth doing, but it didn't run away with the game or feel like it was, too easy. And I thought that was a nice thing to a nice balance to hit. And I love that type of deck. I mean, I want to be messing with my opponent's board.
I mean, you have to be really careful with how powerful the payoffs are for crimes, because Dimir just naturally wants to be a control deck. You just naturally want, your entire deck is just committing crimes. I mean, think about Dimir in Foundations draft. You're just drafting all removal spells. Can you imagine if you got to scry one every time you committed a crime or something? It would just be huge. So they had to be really careful about that. So you had cards like the Raven of Fell Omens, you drain them for one, or even the campaign. You can't make that card too strong, because if you do, then it becomes kind of oppressive, right? So I think they really kind of hit the right mark with kind of the payoffs with the crime cards, and just made them just good enough where you're going to put some of the payoffs into your deck, but not so good where all of a sudden that's all you should be doing in the format, because it wasn't the best thing to be doing in the format. It was one of many decent things you could be doing.
Man, this next one's a tough category, Limmy here, Paul. This is the worst archetype. And it's all bad news here, man. Like, this is, you really nailed it with the first one, the Eerie Dimir control. That was supposed to be so sweet, and it flopped.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, first of all, the black rooms were just kind of bad, right? You're drafting the Dimir deck, and the blue rooms are okay, but the Meat Locker's kind of a tempo-y card. It's really slow. And so And then just the payoffs also just weren't quite there. The Skull Snap Nuisance looked pretty great. It's a 2-mana 1/4 flyer. It's great. So I mean that card looked fine, but there just didn't seem to be enough support around it. And then you had something like a Fear of Infinity, which is okay, but I just feel like as a payoff, I mean, compare that to Oblivious Bookworm, and all of a sudden you're like, come on.
Joke. It's a total joke. Yeah.
They made mythic level uncommons in the other colors. So Skull Snap's Nuisance in a lot of colors, I mean, in Foundations too, it would just be a good body.
A solid card. Right.
But if you're going to make Gremlin Tamer and Oblivious Bookworm, you better make a Dimir card that's on that level. And they just didn't.
And they just didn't.
Right? They just didn't. So that's part of it. There were 2 signpost uncommons in each color. Both of them were just fine, but not insane. And the Rooms deck just didn't end up coming together. It's actually the lowest win rate archetype for the entire year among all sets at 51.8%.
Oh, so that's tough.
Pretty rough.
And it looked like it was going to be good. And that, by the way, speaking of pretty rough, and speaking of the entire year, Paul, you alluded to it earlier, but oh my goodness sakes, Blue-Red, Izzet Spells had a rough year.
Yeah, Izzet Spells was just the worst thing to be doing in most instances. Apologies. It was actually the worst thing to do. Eerie Dimir was one of the worst. Actually, in OTJ, Blue-Red had a win rate of 51.4%. Okay. In Bloomborough, the Blue-Red Otter Spells deck had a win rate of 52.4%. So unless you're a rank 1 drafter to 4 who forced Blue-Red Otters all the time, you're not going to win with this archetype. Mm-hmm. Then in Duskmourn, the Blue-Red Rooms deck had a win rate of 52.9%, which was one of the worst. And then in Foundations, the Blue-Red Spells deck is one of the worst at 53.4%. So clearly there is an imbalance here. There is something wrong fundamentally with what they're doing with the spells deck, and they need to find more ways to push some of the Izzet Spells decks. You need the payoffs to be stronger. You need it to be able to keep up with. I mean, look at what we just talked about it. They did a really great job of making Simic Frogs into a good playable archetype. You could definitely do it with the Izzet Spells deck. But the question is, how good are the payoffs and are they fun? And I think they thought maybe Tolarian Terror was going to be the answer for Foundations, because if the Blue-Red Spells deck is good, that card's probably one of the Foundation creatures that you want. But at the same time, it just didn't quite end up getting there. And so I think they need to do an overhaul, and you just need to make more cards that do more things for that color combination. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but it just, you need to just push the cards a little bit more. You need.
Yeah. Cause I think Foundations is a good case study, because there's 2 major components that need to come together to make an archetype work like that. And, one of them are the enablers, so the spells themselves, right? You need a cheap cantrip, you need cheap burn spells, you need things that can get you through your library without costing you too much mana, so that you can get these triggers going without, weighing you down or running out of gas too quickly. And Foundations actually has all of that. It checks all the boxes for all of those things. It has, it has cards like the what's it called? The fleeting whatever distraction. It has burn spells that are really, really good, like Burst Lightning's, GOAT tier burn spell. And it has ways to churn through your library by using spells. But the other half of the equation is the hard one, which are the payoffs. And they gave you some decent stuff. Balmor's really strong and can, lead to a good win, but not really in this particular set, because it's not super well supported there. And then, but then you get the conflicting messages, right? So it's like, okay, do I want to do Firebrand Archer stuff where I'm sort of pinging away at my opponent, the 2/2 flyer or the 2/1 on the ground that pings them when you cast spells? Okay, that's one way to do it, where you're sort of chipping away at them, slowing them down, using tempo cards, and their life totals just slowly going down, 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 down. Or do you want to do the Cyclops type thing where you build this one huge creature that you can use some spell to make it unblockable or give it flying or give it trample, and then it smashes in for 12 and their life total, or the Balmor thing where you cast 4 spells with 3 creatures out and that have flying and Balmor, and boom, you hit them for 19 damage in one hit. But these are 2 different strategies and they don't tend to overlap. And then on top of it, like the 2 commons that are supposed to be carrying the load, the Cyclops and the Archer, they're both just bad. Like they both just aren't up to rate.
They just needed to make adjustments. I guess that those were kind of reprint slots, but if the Cyclops even had 1 power, that would make a big difference. If the Archer was a 2/2, right? Or whatever, if it had reach. I mean, there's just like little knobs that you can push the creatures a little bit more. Obviously, just a 1 toughness creature in this format is pretty terrible in general, unless it gives you some value. Maybe scrying is a better payoff when you cast a spell. There's just all kinds of different things you could have done. Another issue that the blue-red decks just typically tend to have fundamentally is trying to find the balance between the number of spells and creatures you have. Yeah. Right. Just because it's like you have to still play to the board. Right. Because if your opponent just curves out, what are you going to do? You're just going to have a bunch of fleeting distractions and think twices in your hand. You need to play to the board. But then the more creatures you play, all of a sudden your density of spells in your deck goes down as well. So I think an important type of card to have maybe at common is Dragon Fodder. Right, you just want like a spell that makes tokens, and in this instance, it's Goblin Surprise. But Goblin Surprise is just below the bar in terms of what you get for creatures. Like 3 mana for 2 1/1 tokens is pretty bad. I love Faebloom Trick, right? That's obviously just a great card in general, but Faebloom Trick obviously is amazing in blue-red spells. So Dragon Fodder even would have just been a really nice card to have in this format. So you're like, hey, I can still keep pace with what you're trying to do, and then I can have a spell in my graveyard, have a board, and still play my Tolarian Terror or whatever other way to take advantage of the fact that I have a bunch of spells in my graveyard. But was regularly the worst or second worst archetype in 3 of the 5 sets this year or something like that.
That's a big problem.
And the only time it did well, the only time I think it did really decently well was when it was not focusing on the spells theme. So maybe you just need to move away from spells. I know that's kind of its identity, but anytime blue-red is doing the spells thing, it doesn't win. And then when you're doing the blue-red artifacts deck in MKM, that deck was actually fine. The Gear Drake was great, good, fantastic pushed uncommon for that archetype. And then the blue-red energy deck, it wasn't the best of the energy decks, but it was still fine. And it wasn't relying on spells. It was just kind of relying on synergies instead. So maybe you either have to go down that route, or you just need to push the spells archetype a little bit harder. Because if you do it and you try to replicate the formula that you have for this year, you're just not going to get there.
Yeah, that's really tough. It almost feels like they need to go for the boring middle, where like you get bonuses for casting spells, but they're on cards that you would play anyway. Like you're not building towards that. It's just, you might throw in a couple of extra cantrips, but you're, like you said, it's really tough to build to get the composition right of the deck, because the best blue-red spells decks have like 9 creatures or something, and the rest are spells or spells that make creatures. But the problem is like, Foundations is a good example. The removal's really good. Like if they want to kill your payoff, they'll kill your payoff. And then you're sitting there with a bunch of think twices, like you said. You had an honorable mention for worst archetype.
Yeah, and this is one of the strongest archetypes of all the archetypes that we've had.
Hated,
but
though.
It is Boros aggro in Murders at Karlov Manor. It nearly made me quit the entire format because of how much I disliked the play pattern of being on the draw and having my opponent go 1, 2, 3, +2/+1 my team with Investigate. I don't remember the name of that card. Or 1, 2, 3. Person of interest on turn 4, turn 5, +2/+1 my team Investigate. Yep. It happened so frequently where I just felt like I had no control over my wins, and to the point where I almost it's rough when one archetype makes you nearly quit an entire draft format, and that was that case for me. Fortunately, I stuck with it, and I actually did end up coming around to the format because the format self-corrected. But Boros aggro and MKM was a little bit too pushed. It was a little bit too strong, and it just didn't leave a lot of room for you to be able to kind of fight what they're trying to do. Yeah,
I was really worried it would actually just straight ruin the format. And as I said, I was already kind of on my soapbox for like months about that sets being too fast. And I'm like, really? Like this is the answer? But it turned out that wasn't the case, and I'm glad I stuck with it. The Limmy for Best Man Award. This is an easy one. This might just be the best mana war ever made. It's Unnerving
really
Grasp. Yeah, I mean, in order for it to be a mana war, it has to cost 3 and make a 2/2, so it fills this requirement. But being able to hit anything and then also getting the bonus for Manifest Dread of the card selection and all that, dude. This is like a goat. Like when I saw it, I read it like 3 times. I'm like, because, they print cards that are similar to Mana War, but they're not as good generally. They're usually like, like the Shark, like Big Fin Bouncer or something, right? Which like it's totally fine, but like 4 mana, 3/2s, you'd rather have the 3 mana option, whatever. But this thing is just like, it gave it all. I was like,
it was permanent,
smokes.
right? It was any permanent. You can target your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it had Manifest, which is just better than a 2/2.
Manifest Dread, you get to choose.
You get Manifest Dread. And then there's Manifest Dread payoffs that existed in the format as well. There's Delirium. This just did absolutely everything that you wanted while also being a mana war.
Yeah.
And so this was one of the best uncommons in that set, in a sea of that whole set was defined by mythic level uncommons, and this still kind of stood out as one of the best ones.
Definitely. So congratulations, Unnerving Grasp. You win the best mana award. This is a big one. What was the set of the year? I know what I have in my mind. What do you have?
I don't know that it's close, but for me, it's Duskmourn.
I think definitely Duskmourn.
I think Duskmourn was one of the best sets in quite a long time. And this is despite the fact that there were certain color combinations that just didn't work, right? The blue-black deck and the blue-red deck weren't particularly strong, but there were so many other good cross-color synergies. The Manifest Dread worked seamlessly with Delirium. The aggressive stuff also really worked. The 2-power stuff really worked. Red-green aggro worked. There's just so many different ways to draft this format, and the mana fixing was also great, so you can often have solid 3-color decks as well. And it was just replayable. I drafted this set more than any other set, probably by double.
Oh, wow.
I feel like I've done
crazy.
I've done 100 plus drafts of Duskmourn. Of course, that was also the set. Maybe I'm biased. That was a set where I actually did get to hit rank 1 because I went at it super hard. But I really love the set, and I think a lot of other people really, really enjoyed drafting that set. It's also a set where you never ran out of things to do. The existence of rooms meant you just always got to use your mana. And I feel like most players like formats where you don't just sit there and you just kind of run out of gas, right? And that'll happen even in Foundations draft, right? You just don't have as many mana sinks. But that set didn't have shortage of that. There were so many just powerful build around uncommons that helped you, that were so powerful that you should take them first pick, which we often don't take the multicolored card first. But in this instance, you're like, you know what? I'm taking that Bookworm, and I'll probably splash it. It'll be fine. It's just that good. Like, that's how good that card is. It's a 2-drop that it's still correct to splash if you have the good mana fixing.
Totally.
Like that's just how some of these uncommons are absurd. But yeah, for me, it's Duskmourn.
Definitely Duskmourn. To me, Duskmourn is the archetypical perfection of the modern limited set that is going hard, right? Like, they did not pull punches. It's complicated. There's face down cards. There's a lot to read. There's a lot of extra text tacked onto cards that, does it really need to be there? Maybe, maybe not. But on your 40th draft, you're kind of happy that text is there because it makes the format just a little bit more interesting. It makes the games play out a little bit more. And to me, yes, a few archetypes miss, so it isn't like perfection in that way, but that's always going to happen. And this set is hard. It's complicated. It doesn't get old. The gameplay's good. The drafts are good. The deck building's good. Like, every single thing about this is a checkbox for, a current era limited player who wants to go deep, right? Who wants to figure it out. And by the way, one thing that did stand out too is this was a set, and Paul mentioned it earlier, but this is a set that they had 2 gold Signpost uncommons per color pair. And I don't know if it's a coincidence that this is one of the sets that's really deep and really interesting and really has a whole lot going on, that they got to take 2 shots, because we saw a lot of this break down into color pairs where both of them missed-ish maybe weren't like terrible, but like you mentioned for blue black, something like that, or were both of them really hit for like blue white? Remember Gremlin Tamer and the Glimmer? Like those were both awesome, in that deck. Right. And then some of them kind of split the difference, right? Like maybe blue green had Growing Dread plus Bookworm. Bookworm was like, God tier, and Growing Dread was fine. Solid card. You could play it, whatever. And like that did add an interesting wrinkle to me, Paul, as as we learned more about the format, went deeper, figured out the archetypes, having double the Signpost Gold uncommons was a design twist that maybe I think they should revisit.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, the format was defined by those Signpost uncommons. And it's actually probably not a coincidence when you look at the win rates of those color combinations, where the Signpost uncommons that are really good are the color combinations that had a really high win rate, right? Like the red green 3/2 haste delirium trampling creature, right? The Wicker Folk Thresher, I believe.
Yep.
That card was excellent. Beastie Beatdown, also just an excellent card. So Gruul checks the box. Awesome. But when you look at blue-red, you have the blue-red 2/2 vigilance creature that flings rooms and deals 2 damage.
Yeah.
And then you had the Smoky Lounge, and both of those just ended up being so much worse than some of the other things that you could be doing, where maybe that also affected the win rate because of the other Signposts just being so strong. Also, noting that blue-green specifically, I think they cheated. Blue-green had like 5 or 6 Signpost uncommons because they just weren't multicolored.
Yeah.
Right. You had Paranormal Analyst, threats around every corner.
Yes.
Those should be payoffs. So like, I don't know, somebody really wanted the Manifest Dread deck to work, because I was just thinking, why on earth do these cards exist? Because they're on the power level of these multicolored Signpost uncommons as well, but they only really fit into a specific archetype.
Totally. Yeah. They did sneak those in. And by the way, I have to give a shout out to this. This doesn't really fit in any category, but one of my favorite designs of the year was Manifest Dread, the card, because it's called Manifest Dread, and then you read the text and it says Manifest Dread, and you're like sort of staring at you like, what did you want? You wanted you wanted more? Like I told you already.
I did the thing.
yeah. I thought that was pretty good. What was your card of the year?
Card of the year. Okay. So for me, the most fun card for me, the card that my card of the year, this is not the highest win rate card or anything like that, was Doppelgang.
Nice.
Once I actually understood the card and it had it cast against me, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to take this card and I will never, ever pass this card, was kind of my thought process, unless I'm Rakdos or something in pack 3. So that was a card, and it was just... It's like, and then you just play the game of how big can your doppelgangs be. I think my biggest doppelgang was a doppelgang for 4.
Oh my God.
So that one was kind of ridiculous. Well, with green, you can sometimes generate a bunch of mana. The games go really long. So
please say you won that
was a fun. I did manage to squeak through with that one.
Yeah. My card of the year, it's humble, but I'm giving it to Pawn Prophet. And the reason why is, well, it's just awesome. Like it was a cool card and it was interesting. And anytime they make a card that costs 2 mana, is a 1/1, and you draw a card off of it, which we've had a few of those. There's one in Foundations for, in white. And so like this is not an uncommon design, but when people would untap and kill it, you're doing something right? Like they would go, okay, you spent your 2 mana, you got your card, I'm going to use a burn spell on your 1/1 while you're tapped out. It's like that says a lot about the effect that type of card had in its own archetype, because people do not want to be doing that. That is definitely not what you want to be doing. But to me, the real reason that I picked it for this is that I love Simic. And it's carrying the flag for Simic, right? Like this is the time when we got Simic to be really good, and this was, to me, the card that I think of when I think of that. What about just the best card? What was the number one, like, most powerful card of the entire year, do you think?
There's so many good ones, right? There's so many, but Overlord of the Mistmoors comes to mind.
Definitely.
Right? That one was absolutely bonkers. But the best card for the entire year was Aurelia's Vindicator.
That was the number one?
Coming in at a win rate of 68.5%. It is absolutely ridiculous. It makes sense, right? I mean, we're talking about just face value. This is a 4/2 flying ward life-linking creature. Ward 2. It's got Ward 2. That card's amazing. But if you ever face this down and you just flip it up and it's like you flip it up and you just parallax wave your opponent. You just wipe out their entire board and you just kill them. Right. And it's also just kind of hard to kill because it's got the ward baked in as well.
That's incredible.
So this card is just good at any point in the game. This isn't, we don't, if there is a card that we give the letter S to, it would be this one.
Yes.
Because it's A++. This was the best card of the set of the entire year, edging out the Overlord of the Mistmoors.
Wow. Congratulations to one of the best bombs we've ever had there with Aurelia's Vindicator. Okay, this is a big one. What about Mythic Uncommon of the year?
There's so many. There's so many that were quite strong. We think about Dreadwing Scavenger, which I think right now in Foundations has a pretty comfortable lead as best uncommon in the set. It's just an absolutely amazing creature. Just looting every turn is great. Evasion is great. And then, of course, when you turn this into a 3/3 Death Touch Flyer, that's also fantastic. But there's a card that beats this by 2.5%. And Dreadwing Scavenger is amazing. Yes. And this is in Modern Horizons 3. And that is, and it is not Writhing Chrysalis, that's a common, but it is the Amped Raptor coming in at 64.1. 64%. What's the best rare in Foundations? Like, does it even hit 64%?
I think it actually hits 64%. Like, I think that I'm going to look. Yeah, it's 64.1%, and it's Liliana, Dreadhorde General. Embercleave's at also 64.1.
So it has the same win rate as the best rare as Embercleave and Liliana. That's ridiculous.
And I mean, it makes sense. Mana.
Yeah, imagine playing a Bloodbraid Elf for 2 mana.
Yeah.
And energy was the actual best thing to be doing in that entire set. Everybody was talking about how busted and how much of a mistake Writhing Chrysalis was. And it probably was. It was probably a little bit too pushed. But the energy, like literally everything in red and white basically said, enter the battlefield, make energy, right? It was just so supported. You know, I could rely on my Solstice Zealot to just be a 3-mana 2/3 tapper. Right, you just had infinite energy in that deck,
incredible.
And so you just play that. You just play this thing and you just win the game. I mean, the thing is, oftentimes you don't want to play this on turn 2, but you play this turn 4. You could play this on a double spell turn, but you're gonna have energy. So oftentimes on turn 4, it would be a triple spell turn where you go Amped Raptor, use your energy, play something else, and then you can probably play another 2-drop. And just most decks just can't keep up with that, just that amount of pressure. And so, yeah, Amped Raptor by far the best uncommon in the set this year.
Yeah, that's by a big chunk too. And man, that's going up against some pretty tough stuff in MH3. I mean, they took the gloves off for that. What was the biggest win of the year for limited players?
I think number one, us being given one of an all-timer set. I think in Duskmourn. I think Duskmourn is going to go down, and for most people as a top 5, top 10 set, depending on how long you've played the game for of all time. So Duskmourn was a really, really solid set. And then on top of that, I just think in general, the overall quality of the main set releases that we've had this year were all pretty solid. I was a little bit worried about MKM at first, absolutely. And it's definitely not top of the list, but I enjoyed drafting OTJ. I enjoyed drafting Duskmourn, and Foundations also has been something that has surprised me in its replayability and the fact that I'm just going back to it and drafting it a decent amount. So I think they did a fairly good job with limited in general, this set, and we were given a top 5 to top 10 limited set of all time.
Yeah, it was a pretty good year for limited. You know, the Pioneer Masters to me is a bit of a flop, but it's not one of the main sets, and it's a reprint set that has to kind of, you know, you have to kind of put together a set with stuff that's already been made. It's so much easier if you can say, we need a card that does this. Okay, make it, versus we need to find a card that kind of does this, and this is the closest thing that we could find. So I don't hold it to the same standard that I do, you know, cards where they're actually just making sets. Bloomborough was, you know, it was kind of like what I was worried Foundations would be, which is a little too straightforward, a little too on the board, a little too repetitive. it was that. It was fine. You know, it checked the box. I think we gave it a B or something. You know, it was like, it's fine, right? But it was a little flat. But the rest of the sets really did deliver, and it particularly with Duskmore, and that was a huge, that was a really like an all timer for us for sure. What about the biggest loss of the year for limited players?
Yeah, this is rough. If you're a competitive limited player, I think they may have removed yet another avenue to showcase your limited prowess. There was no draft for Arena Championship 7. Man. I'm not entirely sure, but that probably means that there's a good shot that we're not going to see limited for future Arena Championships as well. And that was probably, I mean, that was one of the higher level events, the highest level event online probably to showcase your limited prowess, because you're playing for a slot at the World Championship. You're playing for $30,000 slots for the Pro Tour. So it was pretty unfortunate because, I even put the request in because I didn't know the format changed, because I covered Arena Championship 7. I was telling Jeff, the producer, I was like, hey, I would really love 2 limited rounds because that's my thing. I draft all the time. Please give me 2 limited rounds. And Jeff was just told me, yeah, there's no draft. I go, that's brutal. So one less way to see limited at the most competitive level. So that was kind of a downer. The other one is a bigger kind of fundamental issue, and we touched on it earlier. Just the overall weakness of the blue-red spells archetype in all limited formats. I think they need to spend a little more time. They need to bring an Izzet mage into the mix and have that person be like, hey, you're in charge of tuning the Izzet cards to get it to the place that you like, because they have basically missed for the entirety of the year unless they choose not to do the spells thing. So either choose not to have blue-red be spells and you'll have a little more success where it's playing to the board in different ways. Artifacts is probably one of the easier ways to kind of make that work, or, you know, give it some juice. Give it a pawn profit. Give it their own Sunshower Druid and make it work.
Yeah. I had actually a couple of biggest wins of the year too that I forgot to mention. One of them is the continued arena opens. Right? I mean, these have become like, you know, calendar events for us limited players where we get to really showcase our stuff. I think the format is perfect. Like, I love the repetitive, like the fact that you can keep trying on day one so that, like, you know, you can really take a day and try to grind it out to make it into day 2. But then on day 2, it's very unforgiving. Like, it's, you know, you do not have any wiggle room. You're playing against tough competition. But that's good. Like, you're playing for a lot of money. Like, it shouldn't be easy. Right. So I think that's really cool. And then the other thing that was really cool for limited players, I think, for the year was the live draft, the live cube draft, the real life one that we did at that Ultimate Guard put on at the, you know, alongside World Championship this year. And that was cool. I mean, I just didn't think I would ever see something like that, you know, as a limited player. Like, it's the joke that we all make every time you draft a real life vintage cube, like, ha ha ha, do I get to keep the cards or whatever? And it was like, yeah.
Oh, you do.
Yeah, you just straight up do. And, you know, even with some of the weirdness aside, that event was really cool. And, you know, perhaps a once in a lifetime type thing. But yeah, that's really tough about the biggest loss for the arena. Hopefully it was just an experiment that they did that they go back on. Yeah. But, but I would wonder about that. I mean,
I'm playing Arena Championship 8. I would love it if they brought back limited.
Yeah, it'd be very good for you.
That would help me a lot. So,
what was your mechanic of the year?
Yeah, so there were a ton of options to choose from here, but I just ultimately I just had to go with what I believe to be the best set of the year. So I had to pick something from Duskmore, and that's just Manifest Dread. Mm-hmm. It's pretty simple, but I just thought it did a really good job of helping bridge multiple mechanics, right? Manifest Dread in of itself is quite powerful. There were good payoffs for that as well. But then it just also let you kind of do the Delirium thing, right? Which was another one of the archetypes that was being kind of pushed in that format. So I just thought, you know, there's also some skill element to it as well, kind of choosing what you want to do, because you have to look at your graveyard to see what permanents you need in your graveyard to actually hit Delirium. But then also just, I mean, there's just a lot to it that I liked. And if you just look at kind of the cards that performed well in the format, a lot of it were just the manifest cards, right? Even when you look at Manifest Dread, literally the card, you're like, oh, 1 in a green, I get a 2/2, whatever. No, it was a really good common in the set because it helped fuel everything else that all the green decks were looking to do, which was Manifest Dread or getting Deliriums. And so I if I'm playing 2-3 copies of this card, I absolutely love it just because it just did a lot of work. So that's kind of what I have.
Yeah, totally. My favorite mechanics are the more simple ones like Delirium that you mentioned, flashback. I just think flashback plays so well in all the different formats that it's in. Graveyard based stuff is always really cool. So, but I wouldn't pick those for my mechanic of the year because those are, kind of old and they weren't extensively used. I actually like Crimes. I thought Committing Crimes had this simple element to it and they just nailed it. They could have easily made it too good where you're like, well, I'm already going to do this anyway. And now I'm just getting this extra big bonus for it. Or they could have made it too bad where it's like, they figure, well, you're doing this anyway. We're not going to really give you anything for it. And then it's like, well, why is this text on here? They made it just right. They made it so that it did actually pay you off for doing it, but not in a way that felt broken. And you didn't really need to change your gameplay too much. It actually reminded me a little bit of like Landfall, right? Where like you're getting this bonus at a certain time, but it's not, insanity, but it like fits into the natural flow of the game. Like you're going to play lands anyway, right? Like you're not going to not play your land, but it just had a little extra wrinkle to stuff that we do every time. Like, well, I'm going to kill your creature. Okay, well, when? And are you going to wait till you have your payoff set up? Or are you going to do it now? Are you going to play your land now? Or are you going to wait? These are some of my favorite types of mechanics. And I think that Crimes definitely hit that as well. What were the biggest set mechanic or sub themes misses of the year? We'll end with this, Limmy.
Yeah, so we already kind of touched on a lot of this stuff already, but for me, and we kind of had a feeling about this first one, but Morbid in Foundations, Golgari is currently one of the worst performing archetypes in Foundations, mostly because Morbid just isn't the payoff that you need. Yeah. Morbid just doesn't really work very well. And even, they try to make some adjustments here.
They did.
Where you kind of, the clause is at the end of your turn or what have you. But I just don't think it didn't quite hit. Another one is what's funny is I actually like rooms in general. Like I like the way that you play with the rooms. There's information, which side of the room you play. It adds for a very dynamic gameplay. Like if you ever see the double strike room in play, you're like, okay, well, I got to keep that into consideration before I choose my place. But the actual rooms decks, the Eerie rooms deck and even the Izzet rooms deck to some degree, those were just misses. There were just not enough payoffs to be all in on the room strategy. It didn't work because they don't play to the board, right? They're just enchantments. So I just felt like those decks ended up falling a little bit flat. And then a couple of other, and then the biggest thing, like I said before, all Izzet spells decks for the year.
It's a problem. Yeah. For me, much like Morbid, I think that Survival as a mechanic was fundamentally flawed.
Yes.
Any of these mechanics, it's interesting because Morbid is something that you think would be pretty easy to get going and isn't. And Survival is straightforward to get going, but it's slow. It's like basically puts you a turn off. And they didn't put quite enough. They did put some, but they didn't put quite enough in there to get your creatures tapped through ways that weren't combat. And that kind of killed it. It's interesting. I could see the idea. I could definitely see my own brain being like, this could work. But when you actually play it, you just can't have payoffs be that too far back. The other one that I kind of wanted to work maybe slightly better, but I get it that it's hard, was there was a reanimation sub theme in Duskmourn, if you remember, where there was like a couple of huge creatures to get back, like Valgavoth or whatever. And then, there was these, what was it? Live or Die or something like that. What was that card?
Yeah. I know what you're talking about. It's the 5-mana reanimation spell.
Yeah.
And then there's also Valgavoth's Faithful.
Right.
The other one.
That type of stuff. Right.
With Shroud Stomper. Like that's the big thing you want to get back.
Right. And there was this black-white, there was that white reanimation spell too. So they were trying to push that in that black-white deck. And I was pretty excited about it just because reanimation is one of the splashier, more exciting things you can do in limited, right? Especially if you're into vintage cube or whatever, where you can really get a severe mana advantage, but they make you work for it. You have to have like 3 different things. You have to have a big creature. You have to have a way to discard it. You have to have a way to get it back. But if you do, it's like, oh, I did it, and that's the kind of thing, where you get a turn 4 8-drop and you're sending, screenshots to your buddies or whatever, right? Like that's a cool, exciting thing to do. But also like they had to play it safe because if they go too hard at that, it's too good. And they did play it safe and it ended up being a little too weak to be good.
I just think reanimation in general for a normal limited set is just a bad idea. It's just too hard to hit it right perfectly. Yeah. It's just too hard. Either you're over supporting it and you have a bunch of ways to discard cards from your hand at really efficient rates, and you have a bunch of good self-mill cards and a bunch of reanimation cards and amazing payoff cards. But if that's too good, then you're just winning too many games by playing a 7/7 hexproof creature on turn 4 or whatever, right? And then you have the flip side of it where it feels awkward, it feels clunky, you kind of get there sometimes, and that's what was the case for this format, and it didn't quite get there. So I just feel like reanimation, yes, you could do it in Cube Draft. You can make it really streamlined because everybody's doing all kinds of broken things. But for a normal limited set, it's just too tough to pull off. Yeah. And I would probably just avoid looking to do it because you can do it, but it's either going to be too broken or it's going to be too weak, and it's going to be really hard to kind of get that perfect middle ground, I feel.
I zombified a coma yesterday, so
that's
which
awesome.
Is awesome, but it also makes you go, wait, what was your mana looking like there, buddy? I'm just assuming a lot of stuff. I wasn't splashing for Zombify, I'll put it that way.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was bad.
That's what I thought you splashed for.
Yeah, no, I splashed for Coma. It happened. And it was awesome, and I got 7 wins with that deck too. Anyway, great stuff this year. Really awesome year for Limited, honestly. We have all of our little gripes and things that we like to talk about, but when you zoom out, we had a lot of sets and we had a lot of successful sets, and hopefully that'll continue into the next year as well. Paul, thanks for coming on and filling in for Luis. Also, this has become a part of the year that's been really cool too.
No, it was absolutely awesome to be a part of this. Limited is something that I do all the time, so it was just such an easy transition into this, right? And
way of life for Paul.
Yeah. So it's a really nice way for me to just kind of air out a lot of my thoughts. I do those in those videos, but sometimes it's, you get bits and pieces of it. But this time we get to really do deep dives, which I do like, and this is kind of the perfect vehicle for that. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. All right, that's going to do it for this one. We'll be back next week with more. We're going to try to get Sirkovitz on. I don't know if he might be out of the country or out of the country that he lives in, but if he's not, we'll probably have him on. And if even then, we'll have him on shortly as well. Either way. But anyway, if you want to find us on social media, I'm Marshall_LR, and Paul is Houmph pretty much everywhere. You can find everything related to the podcast at lrcast.com. You can find a link to Paul's stream down below in the description. We want to say thank you to Ultimate Guard and to our patrons for supporting us as well. Thanks for another great year. We'll see you next time. So, Paul, what was your strategy at Fogo? I actually have to know. Like, do you? For people who don't know, Fogo de Chao is like a Brazilian steakhouse, and it's all you can eat. So, but the way it works is they come around with the different cuts of meat, literally on a sword. Like it's stuck on a sword, and they carry it, and you have this little disc on your table, and you can flip it to red or green. And if it's green, they'll come over to you and assume that you might want some of whatever they have. If it's red, that signals to them like you're taking a break or you're done. Anyway, and then they will cut the meat right off of that sword thing and onto your plate. But the thing is, they have a lot. Like there's a bunch of different stuff, not only, cuts of meat like beef or, that type of thing, but also things like chicken. There's sausages, things like that. And everybody has their own strategy about the stuff that they really like and that they wait for versus like some people just take some of it all. What do you do, Paul? Are you an everything guy or?
Okay, I will say what I did for this last Christmas event is not indicative of how I normally approach Fogo. It was an absolute madhouse. I mean, there was a line out the door. It was crazy. The salad bar, everybody was so tightly squeezed together. I didn't even know how to get into the salad bar. I didn't even know where the line started.
It's a salad bar? Wow.
Right, and that's normally something that I avoid at all costs, right? Because you just want to be focusing on the meat. So, but in this instance, because it was so busy, I also knew the meat wouldn't really come to me that often, just because they have to make the rounds and it was totally full. So I said yes to a lot more things. But my default strategy is I'll go to the salad bar. I'll get a couple of pieces of the tomato and the mozzarella just to cleanse my palate between the meat. That's basically all I get from the salad bar. Just mozzarella cheese with some slices of tomato. The cheese bread is insane. I know you're supposed to avoid the carbs, but it's just
totally,
I love
dude.
Their
Are you
bread.
crazy?
It's so good.
It is really
these
good.
Brazilian cheese bread. It's got this rice flour thing inside, and it's cheesy. It's amazing. I get baskets of those usually. And then for the steak, things that I try to avoid is basically poultry in general, just because it's a cheaper cut of meat. And so I'll generally avoid the chicken, and if they have turkey, I'll avoid all that kind of stuff. And even for the beef, there are certain cuts that I really like. They have this bacon wrapped fillet, but for whatever reason, I think because it's small, it often comes out dry in a lot of instances. So I actually don't get the bacon. And also I just don't really care to eat the bacon, because I have that for breakfast most of the time anyways. So what I'll get is the flank steak. Their flank steak is amazing. And then they have a specialty cut. And anybody who loves meat as much as I do will know. It's the picanha.
Yeah,
okay.
Another one.
It's the picanha, and that is the whenever you see those pictures like those flyers, it's always the picanha, which are these, they have a huge fat cap on them, and they're kind of curved like this, and then they take slices off of that, and it is absolutely amazing. I like, no matter what, I will always have room for the picanha. It's great. The flank steak is great. Anything they say that has the word sirloin in it, I usually say yes to. And one thing that I love that you don't always get are the beef ribs, which is basically they have a giant beef rib and they'll cut it for you. It's very fatty, very rich, but it's absolutely amazing. And it kind of reminds me of, Korean short ribs, right? The Koreans like to use a lot of ribs in their cooking as well. So that's another thing that I like. So I like to just keep it to the beef. Nothing wrapped in bacon, avoid the poultry, and then cheese balls and the cheese with the tomatoes. But that's kind of my thing. That's what I do, and try to avoid everything else, because your stomach only has so much real estate, and you got to fill it with as much meat as possible.
There's your Paul Chion guide to Fogo de Chao. Enjoy.
There you go.